Okay, good morning, guys. It's Vincent here once again, and welcome to this video. So the last time we stopped at setting up our database context, I mentioned that we're going to separate them, and we set up the one for authentication and registered it in the startup.cs. For this video, we're going to take a look at a number of things. We're going to look at something called DB Context Factory. We're going to create our second DB context, which is going to be our application DB context, which is going to handle things not related to authentication and authorization. And then we're going to create our login screen. So we're going to start creating our screens today and just create account and the login screen. See how it goes from there. Great. So I'm just going to jump into it. I'm going to confirm that I'm starting this recording where I left off of the last one. So there's no change. I'm just going to go to and just show you that there's no change. State up, and if let's clear this and just say git log, and you can see I think this is where we stopped the last time. Added database context to startup.cs, so you can confirm. Alright, great. So I'm just going to jump into it. Let's see what we have done already. So we have our data project, and I have database context, I have application DB context. I haven't added anything here yet. And then I have authentication DB context, which I have set up. For this, we used entities. We used an application user entity. Great. I'm just going to go ahead and add the second DB context. So I'll add a new class here, and I'll call it application DB context.cs. Great. And the usual ceremony, I need to create a namespace. State app.data, database context, and no, that's application DB context, and then the name of the class, public class application DB context. This should inherit from DB context. Great. Now, the fundamental difference is that for the authentication DB context, look, I inherited from identity DB context of application user. So when Entity Framework Core tries to run your migration and it sees this, it knows that I need tables for user management here. And that is why when I run the migration, it goes in and creates all of those tables, ASP.NET users, ASP.NET roles, and all of those tables. So that is because I am inheriting from identity DB context. Now, for application DB context, because I don't need those tables for user registration on my application DB context, so I'm inheriting from just DB context. I hope that's understood. So for a context that you want to manage users and all of that, you have to use the identity DB context. And if it's just a context for storing of things and just for your normal code, you don't have to inherit from identity DB context. Just like before, we need a constructor in this class. So I'll go public application DB context, and then it's going to take in DB context options. DB context options of application DB context. I'll call it options as usual. And all we have to do is just pass these options to base. Great, I think that looks okay. And let's just create an entity here. So it has an entity to it. We know we're going to need this later, so let's just create a property entity now. Now let's start from creating a base entity. Base entity. So the base entity is going to this is going to kind of show you how inheritance works. And just watch for a while here. Namespace estate app.data. That's entities. Then I'll say public abstract class, and I'll explain what abstract means later. Public abstract class base entity. Base entity for now is going to have a number of properties. So public string, ID. So every element in your database needs to have an ID. I mean, it doesn't have to, but by convention, EF Core wants every item to have an ID. So I'll say public string ID. Get set. Well, you know what, for our ID, okay, let's use a string. Public string ID. Public datetime. I want to know public datetime created at. So this tells me when a particular entity in my database is created. All entities are going to have this datetime stamp to them. And let's add another one. Public datetime modified at get set. What else? Let's add a couple more properties here. Let's say public string created by. Oh, this really is unnecessary. I mean, in a more robust application, I want to know who created an entity, who edited it, and all of that. Well, let's add one more property here. Let's say public datetime deleted at. So in a lot of situations, right, in a lot of applications, we rarely delete data. We actually rarely delete data. What we do most of the time is just mark that data as is deleted. So I'm just going to have a property that says public bool is deleted, and this is always going to be false, except when we actually decide to delete that item. So when we decide to delete the item, we won't go into our database and actually delete it. We'll just set the is deleted property to true. And so each time we pull out data to show to our user, because that data is supposed to be deleted, we're going to filter and say, hey, remove all objects that have an is deleted flag set to true. So we now have an abstract based class called entity, but we can't create an instance of this class, and I'll show you what I mean. If I let's see, where can I test this from? Let's just come to application user, and I'll just say public base entity equals new base entity. Now look at the error I'm going to have here. If I hover on this, it says cannot create an instance of the abstract class or interface base entity. Now remember how I told you that the class is like a cookie cutter and that you can create new instances of a class, and this is the first time we're hitting this type of error. Base entity has a special keyword on it called abstract, and because I am making base entity abstract, I cannot create an instance of it. That means I can't create an object out of it. So then if I can't create an object out of it, what use is it, or what can I do with it? Great. Now I don't need any table in my database called base entity, but I'm going to need other entities. For example, First of all, I'm going to command clear here, so remove the red line there. So I'll save this. I'll come into my entities folder and add a new file, and I'll call this file property.cs. So this is going to represent a properties table. A property is going to have a name, the property is going to have a location, an address, and all of that. So I'll just create a property table here. Once again, the ceremony namespace estate-app.data, entities, and that's it. And I can create a class, public class property, and there. So I have a property class, but to use this class as a database table or as a table in my database, I need certain things, right? I need to give it an ID, public string ID, get set, and then I go public string, public date time, created at. And this is the pattern, right? For every class I create that is going to map to my database, I need to create all of these things. So outside the properties that class will have specific to itself, like a property should have a name and a property should have a location, there are generic properties that I want all my entities to have. So I want all my entities to have a created at time, so I can check, okay, when was this entity created? And then that means I will have to repeat this same piece of code in all my entity classes. I don't want to have to do that, and that is why I created the base entity abstract class. While I can't instantiate the base entity class directly, so I can create a new instance of it, I can inherit from it. And so once I say inherit from base entity, suddenly all of the properties, all of these properties that belongs to base entity belongs to property too. So now property has an ID, property has a created at, and all of that. And to prove that, we can see that there's a new type of underline on the ID. It's a yellow line. I think this is the first time we're seeing this, but let me just hover on it. Now it says property.id hides inherited member base entity.id. Now it is saying, hey, this class already has an ID that is coming from somewhere, but you're creating a new one, and this one is hiding the old one. And so now I know that this class already has an ID, and if I map this class to a database, it's going to have an ID table. Why? Because it is inheriting from base entity. Now, which other class might we need in our application? We have property. Let's create a new class and just call it inquiry. Let's say we're going to use it to save people's, say someone needs, or let's just create a new class and call it contact. So let's say contact.cs, which can be a house contact or an agent contact. And sorry, before we do that, let's add a class for this property. So we'll have public string title get set. So the title of the property can be 3-bedroom flat in Abule Bar. So that's what the title can be. So we know a property should have title. Now this class now has so it has this properties that is coming from base entity. It has all of these properties, and then it now has this one title, which is specific to it. So a property should have a title. Now we have a contact class. So namespace, estate-app.data, that's entities, and then I go public class contacts. I'm going to inherit from base entity too, because I want all of those properties from base entity in my contact. But then the contact will now have a public string state, So let's say our states are stored as strings. And then public string local government area. So local government area can be, and so suddenly, right, this contact class 2 has all of that ID and is deleted and created at all because it inherited from base entity. So we haven't spoken explicitly about it, but inheritance really is having a class which we call a superclass. So in this case, base entity is a superclass, and property and contact are subclasses of a superclass. So when a class inherits from another class, it becomes a subclass of that class. Another typical example is in nature. We see inheritance happening in nature too. So we have a superclass which is called mammal. So all mammals have some similar characteristics. For example, all mammals birth their babies whole. So mammals don't lay eggs. I'm trying to remember if the whale is an exception of that rule, but all mammals birth their baby. Or most mammals live on land, and so they're general. And so we have humans are types of a subclass of mammal. Goats are a subclass of mammal, but we have common characteristics. So it's just the same thing. So property and contact are both subclasses of entity because they're sharing similar characteristics, and that's just a very crude way to explain inheritance, but we'll get into the details. But this is what we need for now. And after creating this property and contact classes, how do you tell your application DB context that these are going to be databases? What you have to do is come into, I'll just collapse all of this, set into locally to all over the place, and I'll come into database context and come to application DB context. And I'll add two DB contexts here. The way to tell your database context that, okay, when you run a migration, this is going to be a table in the database, is to add it as a DB set. I'll say public DB set of property. Public DB set of property. Properties. Then get set. So awesome. I need to bring in the namespace here. Now what this means is when the table that is going to hold the properties are created, they're going to be named properties. Next I'll have public DB set of contacts. Call them contacts and get set. Awesome. So now I'm guaranteed that when I run these migrations, they're going to be created in these tables for properties, and contacts are going to be created in my database. I'm going to close all of this. Now, once again, we have to register this class in our startup.cs to make it available to the application. Not program.cs, but startup.cs. So once again, we're going to register it. So just the same way we registered before. Okay, so we have services dot add DB context pool, and what's the name of our DB context? Application DB context. Once again, we need to bring in the namespace, application DB context, and then once again we have to configure our options, tell it what connection string to use. options is going to be I can bring it down a bit so it doesn't look too cluttered. Options such use SQL Server. Once again, we're using SQL Server, and then we pass in the configuration string. So configuration dot get connection string, and then we give it the name of the connection string we want to use. Application DB. Let's use this name for now. And then we're going to add a little twist to this. So I'll add a comma here and come down here and I'll say SQL Server so SQL Server options. So as a SQL Server options, there's going to be, and I'll explain this when I'm done, right? SQL let's change this to lowercase s. SQL Server options. That migration assembly, and then I'll tell it what assembly I want to use. I want to use state output data. I think that should work. Now, just to try to make this a bit clear, I'm just going to put some. Now, what's going on here is for this one, we just said, hey, use this connection string, but SQL Server is very powerful and it's very configurable. Now, with the way we configured this first instance, when we create our migration is going to be created in our web project. So we're going to have a folder called migration in our web project. But what we said when we created the data project is that we want everything related to the database to be in the data project. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, hey, add a DB context called the application DB context. And what SQL Server option does is I am saying, hey, when you run the migration for this, don't create the migration assembly in this project. Create the migration folder and all of that in the estate app.data project. And that's why I'm saying SQL Server options migrations assembly estate app.data. One place that you can get really confused is with the correct bracing and the correct commas, and that is why I'm adding spaces between them. So you see I'm closing off two brackets here, I'm closing off a brace here, so don't get it confused. We're just going to modify this one to look the same, and notice at the end of authentication connection, so I'll just change this to application connection. Now at the end of this bracket, I'm just going to add a comma here and come down and do the same thing I did. I'm going to say SQL Server options, and open this. So SQL Server options dot migrations assembly. I want the migrations to be stored in the same place. Estate app dot data, and I'll close it. A lot of options you can give to SQL Server. So if I go SQL Server options dot, you see there are a lot of commands here. So I can tell it how long should it wait before it times out, maybe querying a database or something. And this can be an important command if you have a database with a lot of items. So you can tell it, okay, this is how long you should wait before you return a response to me. So there are a lot of options you can use for configurability. Well, this is the one we need. We just need to set the migrations assembly. Awesome. I'm going to remove the unnecessary using statements here. I usually don't like to have them. Take this out. Oh no, I think that is necessary. Take this out. Let's see, I think I'm going to commit here just so I don't, I have this work. So get status, see my changes, get add to clear, get commit, added application db context. Awesome. Git push. What branch am I on? I'm on dev. Awesome. Git push origin dev. And we see that commit has been registered. Great. Now we're just going to go in and run those migrations. So you actually see how the migrations work. It can be a bit involved, so I'm going to be using terminal to run those commands. Now, when you're using multiple database contexts, it might look a bit intimidating at first when you have to run migrations, but it really isn't, right? There are various ways to run migrations, and we're simply going to try I think because of updates to .NET Framework, we can just try to run our migrations directly, but if that doesn't work, we're going to go the traditional way. Awesome. So let's just say .NET EF, the normal way, or let's see which folder are we in. ls, we need to go into the source folder, cd src, then we need to run our migration from the web project. Even though our DB context and all of that is in the data context, is in the data project, we still need to run our migration from the web project because that is where it is registered. That is where our startup is. So state app.web clear ls, and I can see that I can see my startup and my CS project. So just see .NET EF migrations add. Now for people trying to do this with Visual Studio, even if you create your project with Visual Studio, you can still come to the command line and run your migrations using the command line, and I really recommend this practice. .NET EF migrations add. You know what, before we do this, we need to create a connection string for our second DB context. So if I come into app settings.json, you see I have just for one. I'm just going to copy it. To copy this, and I'll paste it here. And I need to change the name because I can't have two connection strings, so it's the same name. Call it application DB connection, or application connection. I'll copy it. Now we can have both we can have both of them in the same database. So we can have both of these in the same database. Well, it's usually by tradition we like to separate the database holding our users from the database holding other things. So I'm going to say I'm going to call this estate app users DB, and then this one is going to be estate app DB. So this means I'm going to have two different databases in my SSMS when I run migrations for this application, because I want my users in a completely different DB. That way, if I need to change my database tomorrow, it's just way less hassle. So I'm going to leave them in two different tables. So I have my estate app users DB and my estate app DB. Or you know what, to keep it simple, I'm just going to keep them in the same table for now. If we need to separate them later, we will. But just be aware that because you have multiple, your DB context can point to two different databases. They don't have to point to the same database. I'm going to leave these two to be in the same database. Now I'll come to startup.cs and make sure this is correct. Application connection. Awesome. Return to the command line. So .NET AF migration and initial migration, and I'll hit enter. And I expect that we see an error here, but I want that error to be displayed so I can explain why. So it's saying, hey, you're telling me to run a migration, but more than 1 GB context found, which specify which one to use. So it's saying, hey, I found 2 DB contexts in your application. Which of them am I creating a migration for? And like I mentioned, because we're using 2 DB contexts, we need to tell AF Core which of them we want to create a migration for now. So I'm just going to bring back my command and say initial authentication migration, and this name doesn't have to change. I just prefer to put the name of the context I'm working with. So .NET AF migrations add initial authentication migration, and then I need to tell it what context I want to use. And with that, I'll use the double hyphen sign context with the name of the context. So the context is authentication GB context, if I'm not mistaken. And then I need to pass the project I'm working with, and then with that I'll say project. Now where's the CS project? How do I locate the CS project for the data project? I need to pass the data project now, and the way to do that is to say dot slash. Dot slash means go back one folder. So it's just something you need to remember. When I say dot slash means go back one folder. If I say dot slash, it means this current folder. So I'll say dot slash, and let me show you why I'm doing dot slash. I'm going to open up the folder for the project, which is estate app. So if I open this up, I'll open the source folder, and currently we're here. We're in this folder. We're in the estate app.web folder, and you can see that the files are the same. So I have the CS purge, I have app settings, and all of that. And what I'm trying to do is that I am trying to reach this folder, the data folder. And so we're saying we're saying I am in the web folder. To reach the estate folder, I need to go back one folder, and that is why I said dot slash. Dot slash means go back one folder. If I add another dot slash to this, it means go back 2 folders. But what I want to do is go back one folder, then go back one folder, then go into the estate app.data folder, dot slash, then I'll say estate app.data, and that is basically how to navigate your way around folders on the command line. So I say go back one folder, then go into the estate app.data folder, and that really is all I have to do here. I am anticipating an issue here, but it might just go through. So we hit enter. So we specify the contexts that we wanted to create at and the project we wanted to use. Oh wow, so it just created the migration without any issues. Let's see. If we come to SRC, estate app, we have a migrations folder now, and we have a migrations for authentication DB context. That's awesome. And like you see, the migration wasn't created in the web project as usual. It was created in the data project. That's awesome. Let's create the migration for the second one. I'm just going to use the same command. Instead of authentication DB context, this time I'm going to use application DB context, and I'll say initial application migration. This doesn't have to change, it's just I'll hit enter. Let's see. All right, great. Now let's go back to our project. I'm just going to check here, and I say I have migrations folder, and this time I have a folder because it can't just mash all of these migrations together here, right? So for the first one, it just created it in the migrations folder, and then by the time I realized, oh, there are more of them, it's created it in a folder. And this is the one that creates our contact table and our properties table. So these are the migrations for our application migration. These are the ones that are going to go in and create all of those tables, and these are the ones for our users. Now let's look at this migration for our users. No, let's look at the migrations for our application. I just want to show you some things. Now we see we're creating a contacts table, and even though for contacts we only added the states and the local government area, we see that we have an ID column that is going to be created, and it's deleted, created at, and all of these properties are coming from that base entity, that superclass. And with inheritance, we're able to bring in those properties to our contacts class. And you see it's the same for our property class. The only property we put on properties was basically title, but now you see we have ID is deleted, created at, and all the others. I'm going to now, when you want to update your database, it's the same process. You need to tell it what DB context you're working with and which project. So I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to say .NET EF database update, and I need to tell it what context. So context is going to be, let's start with the authentication one. Authentication DB context. Authentication DB context, and I need to tell it the project. Once again, go back one folder, state app.data. That looks like it should work. Hit enter and fingers crossed. All right, so it looks like that works. Let's go into SQL Server Management Studio and see if we have a database, if we have a new database there. Let me just give this a while. I'm just going to connect, and so databases. See, we now have an estate app DB, and if we expand estate app DB and expand tables, we see we have all of those tables that are necessary for managing users in ASP.NET Core. Awesome. I'm going to come over here and run the migration for the second one, which is the application DB context. So for application DB context, oh, it's done. I'm going to come here and refresh this, and I'm going to take a look at tables again, and you see I have two more tables now. I have a properties table. Let's look at select up 1000 rows. and I see I have all of those. ID is deleted, created that, modified that, deleted that, and title. So that's it. We're using two database contexts, but the both database contexts are talking to one database, estate app DB. We can separate it if we want, but we're really just keeping things simple for now. And this is it, right? We've been able to create our database context. The next thing I'd like us to do is to go in and create a number of rows. So I'm going to commit this first. So I'm just going to clear this. So git add dot git commit can add and run migrations. Now I don't expect you guys to memorize the commands for running migrations. You're free to just write it out somewhere, and with use you kind of stick. So it's not something you actively try to cram or memorize. You're free to look it up, and then by the time you've used it some 10-20 times, it really just sticks. Git commit can add and run migrations, and I'll just push to dev, git push origin dev. Awesome. So the next thing we're going to do is we've mentioned at the start that our application is going to have user roles, and we need to go in and what's going on here? Oh, sorry. So I did that commit in the web folder. I need to go back and make sure I add everything. So I'll see. Git status. I didn't commit our changes in the migrations folder. So git add git commit edit migrations. I'm going to clear this and push it to dev. Git push origin dev. Awesome. Everything is now committed. Great. So now we need to manage roles, because there are going to be different roles in this application, and we're going to have to deny people or deny access or grant access based on one role or the other. So we're just going to do that now. I'm going to show you how to create multiple roles in an ASP.NET this thing, and those roles are going to reflect here. So ASP.NET roles, they're going to be we're going to see them from this database. We're going to create a simple method to help us do that. Is there a way to pause this? Okay, so we're going to create a new method. So sorry for that break, I had to attend to something. So we're going to come outside of this configure method and create a new method here, and we'll just say public async task. Yeah, let's use an async task. Public async task. Let's start from migrate database tables. Migrate database context. Now the reason we're doing this is because so while we're on our system, while we're working on our system, we can afford to run this command to migrate our database on the command line. Well, when we deploy our application to the cloud, it's possible to just do the migration, but it's better that we automatically do that migration. I mean, we can connect to our database in the cloud and run the migration from the command line, but it's better that your application itself automatically runs any new migrations when the application starts, and that's what we're going to be doing here. So I'm going to pass in something called an iApplication Builder app here, and let's just bring in the system.threading.task namespace, migrate database context. So I'm just going to say var application, and let's start with authentication as usual. Authentication DB context with the lower a here, goes to app that let's see, application services, but let's use this, the get required service. We want to get the authentication DB context. So what we're doing here is because we need to run this migration, we need to grab a reference to our authentication DB context, and this is the way to do it. So application services.get required service, and then we can now use this reference to say authentication DB context dot I think that's migration. Let's use another method. So we can say await authentication DB context database dot migrate async. So what you should do is when our application starts, it's going to so it says asynchronously applies any pending migration for the context to the database. We'll create the database if it does not already exist. Note this API is mutually exclusive, does not use migrations. So what it's saying here is that when we call this what this does is it's going to go into our database and check and compare it with our migrations and say, oh, is there a new migration that hasn't been applied to this database? And if it finds any, it's going to run the migration. So we don't have to manually type run migrations or any of that ourselves. And that's that. So we need to run the migration for our application DB context too. So I'll just say var application DB context equals app dot application services dot get required service, and this time I want the application DB context. Awesome. And the same way I can say await application DB context dot database dot migrate async. You know what, instead of using the asynchronous version of this, we really can just use dot migrate. So this is not asynchronous. There are times when it's better to do this asynchronously, but in this situation, I think it's just to So we have this here. So this method is going to make sure our it's migrated when the application starts. So I'll just call it from down here. I'll just come here and say migrate database context. Simple. So after it runs all of this code, it's going to come down here and run this. And I have to pass in app. So I'm running this here because I have app available here. And then I just pass in app. So that's awesome. Well, we've created the migrate database context. We need to create default users and different default roles. So I'll say public void create default roles and users. So traditionally we want there to be a default user when our application starts up. Once again, I'm going to pass in app. So I'm going to pass in application builder app person. Now I'm going to create an array. I'll say an array of string. I'll call this roles equals new string array, and I'll just fill the roles I want to have. So one of the roles I want to have is a system administrator. I'm going to have a role called system administrator. I'm going to have a role called agent because some people are going to be agents. I'm going to have a role called user. So this is going to be a regular user. I'm going to have a role called let's see. So we have the agent, we have the user. Which other role is there in this application? Let's just leave all of this for now. And then a user can belong to one or all of these roles, right? So a user doesn't have to belong to only one role. So for example, the same person can be an agent, can be a system admin, and be a regular user. That way he can access everything, that he can access all of the functionality that is available to all of them. Great. So next, I need a user manager. So like I mentioned in a previous video, a user manager helps us to basically manage everything related to user in our application. So I'm just going to grab the user manager by saying val user manager equals app dot application services. Application services, get required service of user manager. I'm going to bring in a using statement, user manager of application user. That's quite a mouthful. So I'll just include the using statement for this. So I've gotten the user manager. The next thing is for me to now I need to check if a user exists in the database before I actually go in and create that user. So I'll say val user equals user manager dot find by email async. So I'm saying, hey, does this user exist? And the first user is obviously the admin. I'll say admin at estateapp.com. So I want to see if I'm asking if, and for this one, unfortunately, I have to use an await statement. So this has to change to async task. So I'm saying, hey, is there a user with an email of admin@estateapp.com, so which is going to be like our default user or our system administrator. And then I'm going to come and say if user is null, is if this user does not exist. So if the user exists, this is not going to execute. But now I'm saying if this user does not exist, come in here and create a user. Value user equals new application user. So I'll say user equals new application user. I'll give it an email of admin. Instead of having to type this, I'm just going to put it here. I'll say user email equals, I'll just grab this, and then I can just put it here and say user email. So if it doesn't find that, I can say the email equals user email. Let's set the username to user email 2 equals user email. Let's say is let's see, email verified or email confirmed. I want to say yes. So because I'm creating this user from here, I have that I can just go in there. I can set a phone number for the user. I can say phone number equals, I'm just going to use +2347906697346. Hey guys, look, you have my phone number now. So phone number is this, and I'll say phone number confirmed. I'll set it to true. Phone number confirmed equals true. So that's it. Why do we have this? Oh, okay, because we already have a user here, we don't have to add the var keyword, so we don't have to declare this user. You can just use the same instance of the user. After creating this, our default user, we can now come and say await user manager dot create a sync, and we need to pass in a user and the password. Let's come up here and create a password. We'll say var user password equals I like super secret password at 2020. So let's use this super secret password. Don't tell it to anyone. So we have super secret password at 2020, and I'm just going to take this. So I'm just going to use user password. Awesome. So I'm telling it to create this this user. The next thing I want to do after creating this user is to add this user to a row, right? I'll just think a bit about that. So to add this user to a row, because we now know that we've created this user, so outside of this block, we're going to have a valid user, because it's either when our application runs, it's either we actually get the valid user here, and if that user doesn't exist, then we create the user. But whichever the case is, by this line of code, we have a valid user. We're going to grab our role manager. There's something called the role manager. So I'll say the role manager equals app.application services to get the required service. I'm going to grab role manager of application user, just like before, just like all time. So now I have a role manager. What the role manager does, it helps us to manage roles. I'm not going to write a loop, right? I'm going to write a for each loop, and I'm going to be looping over this rows collection I created here. I'll say for each row, for each val row in row manager, not in row manager, sorry, for each val row in rows. Now I'll say if row manager dot find by name is sync Now let's see row cannot convert. Interesting. Let's see. So row manager dot. Okay, get row. Okay, yeah, so this is the one I'm looking for, row exist async. So I want to find out if this row exists. And I just pass in the name of the row. So I'm going to say which row manager the role exists async. So I'll just put an if statement around it. So I'm saying, hey, if this row exists, let's use this, let's do this differently. I mean, I would do this like this, but just to save you guys a confusion, I just say val role exists equals this. So I'm checking, hey, does this row exist? Now, oops. Now this can be this is going to be a true or false value. So if this row exists, it's going to be true, and if it doesn't exist, it's going to be false. So I'm just checking, hey, I'm looping over all the rows, and I'm checking, hey, does this role exist in the database? Has this row been created? If not, so I'll say if role exists. So one thing I can do is to say, and it's a rookie mistake, I'll say if role exists equals to false. So this is what a lot of people would do, but instead of doing if role exists equals to false, you can just put an exclamation mark before role exists, which will mean the same thing. So here I'm saying if role exists is false, and that's one thing. So if role exists is false, what do I want to do? I want to create the role. So I just use my I say await row manager dot let's see dot there's a create async. Let's see, so create to specify the row. Okay, so create to specify the row in the I'll just pass in the row here. I think I'm making a bit of a mistake. I'm going to take this off. Alright, so that fixes does it? Just the row manager string. Okay, I think that should work. So we just change that when we grab the row manager, make it a row manager string. And I'm just going to create. So what this does is it loops over this and it creates each of these rows. And I'm actually going to do this first. So I think I would rather create these rows first before even creating the user. So I have all of this up here, and then I create the row. And so after creating this new user, then I can add it to a row. So I'll say user manager dot add to row async. So I can do this. Now I want to add it to all of the rows, so I'm just going to say I'm going to use the loop here. for each row in rows with user manager dot add to row async. Let me see. Oh, okay, there's an add to rows one. User, comma, and I'll just add that array of strings, and I don't need to use it for each because I can just pass in an array of strings. So what I'm doing here is, instead of add to role async, I'm adding to rows async, and I'm just giving it to the user I want to add those rows to and the list of rows. Recap, let's check out what we did here. So we did this. We created a collection or an array of strings, which is the system admin, agent, and user email, user password. Then we created a role manager. And what did our role manager do? We looped in and we checked, hey, if this role already exists in our database, don't worry about it. But if it doesn't exist, create a new role with that name. And then we came down here and we said, we got our user manager. And then we say, hey, user, does this user already exist? Do we have a user with admin@estateapp.com? Because that's the user we want to be our system admin user. And then we say, if user is no, so if that user doesn't exist, go in and create that user using this password, and then add that user to and then add these rows to that user, or basically add this. So I believe that's understandable. So the way to test this is really, we just have to run the application, and if it runs without any errors, we know that we can just go into the, if it starts without any errors, we can just go into the database and check to confirm. So we need to call this just as we called the other one, passing app. Well, because this is asynchronous, this time we have to say let's get waiter, so get results. So because this is an asynchronous method, we have to do this, and this looks all good. I'm just going to go ahead and test it with .NET Run. If we have any issues, I'll run it from here. CD, I want to run it from the web app project. So yes, and that's where you should run it from. CD estateapp.web. And we can just try everything out by saying .NET Run. Okay, so we have a number of errors. Application cannot resolved. Authentication DB context. And so it's saying, hey, I can't find the authentication DB context, which is weird. So I'm just going to take a look at this for a bit, and cannot resolve scope service estateapp.from root provider at blah 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 blah. Okay, so this is happening on line 80. Let's hop over to line 80 and see what we have on line 80. So yeah, so line 80 is the line where we're trying to get authentication DB context. Alright, so because I don't have the time to start digging into while this is happening, we're going to use the alternative. We're going to use the alternative. Instead of using an app, we're going to use an iService provider. So we're going to simply change this from iApplication Builder to service provider. And I'll call it SVP. Not iService provider factory, iService provider. I'll just say using system. Great. Now instead of app.application service, I just have to say SVP here. SVP. I'll change this to SVP2. I'll take this, and I think we need to replace this here too. So once again, I get the iServices provider here. I replace this with SVP, and I replace this with SVP. Okay, so one last thing. So we need to pass in the service provider here, but we're not accepting it. So we need to come in here, put a comma, and just add it as one of the things to be passed to our configure method. And then we just have to pass in SVP here and pass in SVP here. Awesome. Let's come back here, clear all of this, and run our application again and see how it performs this time. Okay, I can't find the role manager, so we didn't register the role manager properly, I guess then. Oh, actually that mistake was from me. We didn't even register identity, so I didn't have, so that wasn't supposed to work. I'm just going to Control Z most of the things I did, so we're still using app. Sorry. Just change all of that back to app. So application builder, remove that. Just before we run the command, I forgot to register identity, and that's why we got the first error. And I'm just going to configure that very quickly. Let's do that here, just after our DB context pool. I'm going to say services.add identity application user, and this is where we had that initial error, I believe. And identity role of string, identity role of string, and I think I need to bring in this namespace. Let's see. Services, let's add identity, application user. It's a type which is invalidated. That doesn't make sense. I'll just continue that. And oh, okay. So I get what's going on here. I don't think we have a required namespace. Let's see our CS purge. So in our CS purge, we have identity.entity framework core. I don't think we have a reference to identity itself, and we may have to bring in that namespace. Let's see. Let's add identity. This is here, so this is supposed to work. application user, comma, entity order string. Okay. Oh, there was no error. My IDE was just acting up. I just had to complete the statement. Well, that's weird. Add entity framework store. So for .add entity framework store, we need to tell it which database context to use. So for database context, I'm going to pass in the authentication DB context, and I'm just going to add a last statement. Let's add default token provider. So this handles things like tokens and all of that. Great. Next thing I can do is to say services. Let's configure, and then I pass in identity options. And this is this kind of lets you control the details. So should the password, does the user need a super secure password? So go options dot password dot required digits. Should the user have a digit in their password? I'll set it to false. So the user does not have to have a digit in their password. The next is I can say options dot password dot required length. Required length, I'm going to say the user has to provide a password of at least 6 characters, which is reasonable. Options dot password dot require lowercase. Should the person should false, so you don't have to have a lowercase character. But these are really just making our passwords weak. And so that's one thing you should consider. So require non-alphanumeric equals false, and options that password that require uppercase equals false too. So keep in mind that as you're changing this as you're changing all of this, it's going to affect the strength of the password. Let's see, there's one I usually like to change, to sign in that require confirmed email. So I like to set this to false, and sometimes you want the user to have, if you want the user to have confirmed their email before being able to sign in, you just set this to true. But then you have to wire up the whole sending an email to someone to verify their email. We're going to do that later. So options to sign in, that required confirmed phone number, we're going to set this to false too, so you don't have to have confirmed any of this. And so with all of this set, the reason we couldn't run our migration before was because we did not register identity or identity options. So with this set, hopefully it should be a breeze now, although I still anticipate some errors. Let's just run this and see. Oh, interesting. Cannot create scope service from which provider? Application setup database. Okay, so let's see. We're using 3.1. To play safe, I'm just going to revert to using an iServices provider and see if iService provider SVP. Let's see how it behaves with this. I just did not want to include that dependency here, but I guess we have to. And I'm just going to clear this and put this instead, and clear this and put this instead. And before we just need to replace. I'm just going to do a search and replace. Replace it with SVP and also replace all. Everything looks okay. Hold on. Okay. So we actually might be having an error because we are using exactly. So no service of type Microsoft.ASP.NET Core Identity. The role manager has been registered. This is weird. I'm just going to go and pick one of my Stack Overflows. I've had this, so sometimes you run into this issue. I'm going to go to Stack Overflow and just pick my answer to. I answered this question on Stack Overflow once. I'm just going to scoot over and pick the answer I gave for this. Where's my profile? So how to register role manager, identity user, identity role, blah blah blah. So let's see, what am I doing different here? Okay, so this time I'm registering identity role with a parameter. I'll just take it out and everything looks the same apart from application user. Let's come here and clear. Oh, by the way, so someone asked this question a few months back, and I just provided an answer to that. Ironically, and this is the way programming works, right? A lot of times I'm working and I don't remember stuff, and I head to my blog to read something. So writing is even a way of reminding yourself that, okay, this is what I was doing here, or this is how to do X thing. So let's see if this works. I still can't find the role manager. This is weird. Line 1110. Okay, so I forgot to change this. Remember, I changed my role manager to just role manager, not role manager of string. A second. I don't know if I have a project here. Let's go to data. We might have forgotten to register it somewhere. So let's put a comma here and say identity role. and using Microsoft.ASP.NET Core identity. You know what? I think a number of things changed. I'm just going to check this out in the official documentation. So let's read it. Let's go. Just doing role manager. So let's see from the official documentation. So this is not it. Let's pick this. Okay, so this is the same error what we're getting. Nope. Let's see, created menu. Okay, role manager of identity role. I see. I think that's the mistake we've been making. That's the mistake I've been making. I'm just going to try to grab role manager of identity role instead of role manager of string. I'll say role manager of identity role. Okay, so I guess I have to say a lot of things definitely changed. I believe a lot of things changed because this isn't the way it was. Let's see, new identity role, name equals role, and I'll explain this. Let's just confirm that it works. Well, if this works, then the way this is handled definitely changed. So I'm grabbing a role manager of identity role. Let's see. Clear this, and then let's run this. Oh wow, so it's again without an issue this time. So let's come back and see what changed. So we were trying to create, the first mistake I was making was I was trying to grab a role manager of string, but this changed. I guess it's changed in ASP.NET Core 3 point something. So we're grabbing a role manager of identity role, and then when we create a new role, we don't just pass in the name of the role we want to create. We have to pass in a new role instance, like an object, and set the name of that role object to role. You used to be able to just pass in the name of the role you want to create, and it creates it. But I believe it's working fine now. Let's come into our database and check our roles table. And we see 3 roles in our table now. We have an agent role, and a system administrator role, and a user role. Now, if I come to our users table, you see that our user was created. So when our application runs this user, and this user will be created just once, except it's deleted, then the application will recreate it. We have this user here, and then let's look at this ASP.NET user roles. Now mark the ID for this user. It starts with B31. if we come to user roles, our user roles table, and we say select top 1000 roles, we see we have 3 entries here now, and the user ID is the same. So this means that the user with this user ID has all of these roles assigned to it, and that's basically it. And that's it. So what we've been able to do here is we've been able to create a default user which has all of these roles and which has this password. We've been able to create roles in our application. So when we create a new user, for example, if someone signs up from our front page, we can just add them to a role, just like we said here, add them to whichever role we want, and we can create default users. We've seen how to migrate different database contexts. I'm going to stop this video here so it doesn't become too long and too packed with information, but we've been able to achieve some things here. I'm going to clear this, go back 2 folders less, and just commit everything. So created default user and roles. And I'll just push this, git push origin dev. And great. Let's see. So it's all committed. For us to be able, so I'm not going to push this to Azure yet, because if you push this to Azure, it's going to fail. It's going to fail on, it's not going to deploy on Azure, because when it hits this line to create your database, it's going to go and look for a database and it won't find one. So in our next video, we're going to go into Azure and create a database so that when this is run, it just migrates the database successfully. Thanks guys for watching, and just drop me your questions where you have them. Thank you.